The story of Let Him Go opens in 1961 Montana, establishing the peaceful ranching life of retired Sheriff George Blackledge and his wife Margaret. They live with their son James, his wife Lorna, and their young grandson Jimmy. The idyllic setting is shattered when James is killed in a tragic riding accident, falling from his horse and breaking his neck. 2 years later, Lorna remarries a man named Donnie Weboy. Margaret is immediately suspicious of Donnie, noting the lack of warmth between him and Lorna, and sees the couple's body language at the small wedding as all wrong. Her fears are soon confirmed during a chance encounter in town where she witnesses Donnie roughly grabbing and striking Jimmy after the boy drops his ice cream and then hitting Lorna when she intervenes. Margaret is horrified by the abuse and resolves to speak to Lorna. However, when she goes to their home, a neighbor informs her that Donnie, Lorna, and Jimmy left abruptly in the night without a word, presumably heading to Donnie's family in North Dakota. Margaret, a strong-willed and determined woman, decides immediately that she must go after them to retrieve her grandson, believing Jimmy is in danger with Donnie. George, quieter and more measured, initially questions the legality and wisdom of her plan, pointing out that Lorna is Jimmy's mother and has a right to choose where they live. Despite his reservations and a pragmatic understanding of the grim realities of their situation, George ultimately cannot refuse his wife and agrees to join her search. Their quest becomes a journey driven by the grief over their lost son James and the desperate need to protect his only child. The couple begins their long drive from their ranch in Montana into the Dakotas, relying on George's old lawman contacts for leads. A former colleague, Sheriff Nevelson, directs them to a branch of the Weboy family in Forsyth, Montana. There, a Weboy-related saddlery owner directs them further, suggesting Donnie's family might be in Gladstone, North Dakota. As they drive, the tension between George and Margaret is palpable, a mix of their enduring love and Margaret's unwavering, almost reckless determination clashing with George's reluctant pragmatism. Their trip takes them through remote, desolate landscapes. They encounter Peter Dragswolf, a young, quiet Native American man living alone on the plains who offers them shelter for a night. Peter warns them about the Weboys, telling them that if they ask for a Weboy in Gladstone, they will be found. Following Peter's warning, the Blackledges are quickly intercepted in Gladstone by Bill Weboy, Donnie's uncle. Bill is manipulative and evasive, but eventually lures them to the family's isolated ranch, telling them that Donnie and Lorna want to meet them. He claims they had been trying to avoid an awkward, uninvited confrontation. Upon arrival, they are introduced to Blanche Weboy, the matriarch of the family, a seemingly charming but subtly menacing woman who rules her adult sons with an iron fist. The dinner with Blanche and 2 of her other sons, Elton and Marvin, is a psychological battlefield. Blanche's initial veneer of hospitality quickly peels away to reveal a cold, possessive nature. She aggressively defends her son Donnie, suggesting the Blackledges are unwelcome outsiders who disapprove of their new family member. She admits that Lorna and Jimmy are not currently at the house, claiming Donnie took them to pick up Lorna from her job in town. Margaret is furious, realizing they have been toyed with and lured to the ranch under false pretenses. The conversation escalates and Blanche coldly asserts that Jimmy now belongs to her family, ending with a shocking and violent display of dominance. Blanche and her sons demand the Blackledges spend the night, refusing to let them leave. The next morning, George and Margaret sneak out and return to Gladstone to find Lorna at her workplace. They convince her to leave Donnie and return to Montana with Jimmy, but Lorna is terrified of the consequences. She agrees, only to secretly meet them later that night. However, when Lorna is late to the arranged rendezvous, the Blackledges try to go back for her but are stopped and brutally assaulted by the Weboys. Bill Weboy, acting on Blanche's orders, attacks George, slicing off 2 of his fingers and severely beating him, while Margaret is hit and left traumatized. The Weboys make it clear that the Blackledges are to leave and never return. Margaret, initially ready to leave to save George's life, is overwhelmed by the combined grief and trauma, finally realizing the true danger and the depth of the loss of both her son and her grandson. George, seeing Margaret's devastation, secretly decides to return to the Weboy ranch one last time. He knows his strength is failing and this will be his final act. He finds a shotgun, loads it, and sets the Weboy barn on fire as a distraction, creating chaos while he slips into the house. He finds Lorna, Jimmy, and Donnie and forces Donnie out of the house. In a brutal final confrontation outside, George shoots and kills Bill Weboy before being mortally wounded by a shot from Blanche, who then shoots her own sons Elton and Marvin for failing her and to cover their crimes. A wounded George manages to get one last shot off at Blanche, hitting her in the head. In the end, the Weboy family is eliminated. Lorna and Jimmy escape with George's help. Margaret finds a dying George who has fulfilled his promise to bring their grandson home. Lorna, Jimmy, and Margaret return to the Blackledge Ranch in Montana. The film concludes with Margaret caring for Jimmy, her sorrow over losing George now tempered by the hard-won comfort of her grandson's presence, finally allowing herself to let him go in death now that Jimmy is safe. Their first visit is tense and unnerving. They are barely allowed 2 minutes with Jimmy before Donnie's imposing mother, Blanche Weboy, asserts her absolute authority, ordering the boy upstairs and openly criticizing Margaret and George's presence. Blanche's husband, referred to as Mr. Weboy, reinforces the family's dismissiveness, mocking the Blackledges as they are forced to leave almost immediately. Unwilling to give up, George and Margaret track Lorna down at her new job in a department store. They meet her for lunch at Wrestlers and skip the pleasantries, laying bare their true intentions. Margaret confirms her worst fears, telling Lorna she witnessed Donnie hitting both Jimmy and Lorna on the street. Margaret believes Lorna and Jimmy are trapped in an abusive situation. They ask Lorna to give up Jimmy to them, believing he would be safer in their home. Lorna is visibly distraught, explaining that she knows her son needs to escape the Weboy's toxic influence, but she fears Donnie and especially Blanche. She reveals that Blanche, having lost control of Donnie once before, will never let either of them go again. The Black Ledges offer Lorna and Jimmy a way out, suggesting they come live with them, but Lorna insists she must handle the escape alone. She arranges to meet them at Cabin 7 of the Moonwink Motor Inn around midnight, stressing that they must leave the instant she arrives. Before parting, Margaret shares a painful apology to Lorna, acknowledging that she failed to be the supportive mother figure Lorna needed after James's death, a regret she carries deeply. George tries to connect with Margaret, recalling the day they had to put down their horse Strawberry and Margaret's private farewell words. Margaret explains she was simply reminding the horse of happy memories galloping in the snow, racing a rival, and the quiet dignity the horse showed when carrying baby James for the first time. George sees in this moment the complex, compassionate woman he married, reinforcing his love and commitment to her. However, the Weboy family, led by Blanche, anticipated their move. When George and Margaret return to the house under the cover of darkness, they find Blanche, Donnie, and other family members waiting for them. Blanche, fueled by righteous anger and a distorted sense of loyalty, accuses the Black Ledges of bullying and badgering Lorna to steal her child. George confronts Donnie about the violence, challenging him to show how he struck Lorna. Goaded by Blanche, Donnie assaults George, which quickly escalates into a brutal, unequal fight. Blanche's brother Bill then carries out Blanche's cold command to disarm George permanently by brutally chopping off his hand with a hatchet, a devastating act of violence meant to cripple George and signal the terrifying power of the Weboy family. The next day, a local law official who appears to be operating under the Weboy's influence visits the severely injured George in the clinic. The official confirms he heard the Weboy's story. George pulled a gun and the injury was self-defense. He warns the Black Ledges that Blanche is concerned about accidents following their family, obliquely referencing James's death. The official warns them that the longer they stay, the greater the chances are of tragedy striking Jimmy, emphasizing he's a Weboy now. He advises them to get out of town quickly, free from charges only because the Weboys have chosen not to press them. Defeated, George and Margaret drive out into the remote plains, stopping at a makeshift dwelling where they meet a young Native American man named Peter who lives alone. Peter shares his tragic history of being taken to a government school and losing his cultural identity. The school's mission was to kill the Indian inside. As George rests, Margaret is overwhelmed by grief and despair, recognizing that they have lost their son and potentially their grandson forever. Margaret briefly suggests they stay with Peter and attempt to build a new life in defiance of their loss, but George forces her to face reality. We lost them both. Margaret, however, cannot accept this. She returns to Peter, persuading him to guide her on horseback through the wilderness to sneak up on the Weboy house. Inside, Lorna is being held captive and pressured by Blanche and Donnie. When Margaret appears, she quickly assesses the situation and, without involving George, makes a final desperate move. She gives Lorna the keys to their car, instructing her to take Jimmy drive straight to the sheriff's office in Bent Rock and ask for Sheriff Nevelson. As Lorna and Jimmy escape, Margaret starts a fire, creating a burning diversion and drawing the Weboy men out of the house. Blanche and Bill confront George and Margaret. In the chaos, Blanche shoots George in the chest. As the Weboy men approach, Margaret cradles her dying husband. George, aware that Lorna and Jimmy are finally safe, looks at Margaret. She kisses him goodbye, whispering, "I love you. Thank you. You should go." Peter then helps the severely wounded George, leaving Margaret to face the remaining Weboys and her final successful act of sacrifice to save her grandson. If you enjoy watching this video, then subscribe to Angel Recaps for the latest movies explanation.